Kay slams her hand on the Mafia boss's SUV just seconds before the engines ignite, her voice shaking as she warns him not to start a single car. But when Herbert Lopez demands to know what she saw, her answer freezes every man in the garage, because the bombs weren't the real threat. The moment Herbert looks under the chassis, he realizes the betrayal behind those blinking red lights is far worse and far closer than anyone in that room is ready for. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. The engines were already rumbling in the underground garage. 2 black SUVs, 1 armored sedan, 8 armed guards, and Herbert Lopez, the silver-haired demon of the Western Strip, stepping toward his vehicle. Everything was routine. A precise morning, a calculated departure, until a young waitress in a wrinkled black and cream uniform came sprinting down the concrete ramp, her dark hair wild, her apron still tied around her waist, terror carved into every line of her face. She slammed her hand against Herbert's SUV door so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. "Wait, don't start your cars." The guards snapped into position, weapons raised. Everyone thought she'd gone insane. But the waitress wasn't looking at the men. She wasn't looking at Herbert. She was staring beneath the vehicles themselves, like she could see death crawling there. Herbert stepped forward, his obsidian eyes narrowing. "Why?" he said, his voice cold as winter stone. "What did you see?" The waitress didn't blink. Instead, she slowly pointed to the undercarriage of the SUV, her hand trembling as she whispered, "There's something under it, and it's glowing red." Herbert Lopez had ruled the Western Strip for 22 years. His name wasn't spoken in polite company. It was whispered in smoke-filled backrooms, murmured in police precincts with carefully averted eyes, and never mentioned in public without consequence. At 61, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had never needed to shout to be heard. His silver hair was slicked back with precision, his neck covered in ink that crawled up from beneath his tailored collar, and his eyes dark, unblinking. Obsidian held the cold calculation of someone who had built an empire on discipline, reputation, and fear. Herbert didn't believe in chaos. He believed in routines, systems, predictability. His underground garage was a fortress. Motion sensor floodlights, steel-reinforced ceilings, 4 armed guards per vehicle, and triple-swept routes checked every sunrise. No one got in. No one got close. Nothing unexpected ever happened. Until now. "Check it," Herbert said quietly. One of his guards, a broad-shouldered man named Vance, dropped to his knees and swept a flashlight beneath the SUV's chassis. His hand froze mid-motion. His face went white. "Boss," Vance said, his voice tight. "She's not lying." Herbert's jaw tightened. He crouched beside Vance, his expensive suit pulling across his shoulders, and looked beneath the vehicle himself. A small metallic device was attached to the undercarriage, no larger than a pack of cigarettes. Red LED lights blinked in slow, rhythmic pulses. Wires snaked toward the fuel tank, and beneath the blinking lights, a tiny digital timer counted down silently. Herbert stood slowly, his expression unreadable. He turned to the waitress, who was now pressed against the concrete pillar, her chest heaving, tears streaking her face. "What's your name?" Herbert asked. "KK," she stammered. "Kay Owens." "How long have you worked here, Kay?" "2 nights. I just started. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "How did you see this?" Herbert interrupted, his voice sharper now. "Who let you down here?" Kay shook her head rapidly. "No one. I was taking the trash out. Behind the restaurant upstairs. I opened the wrong door. I saw," her voice broke. "I saw men, 3 of them. They were crawling under the cars." The guards exchanged glances. Herbert's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, something dark and dangerous. "Describe them," Herbert said. I don't know. It was dark. But one of them," Kay hesitated, her hands trembling. "One of them had tattoos, all down his arm, and his forearm. It looked burned. Scarred." Herbert went very still. The garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Vance," Herbert said quietly. "Sweep every vehicle. Now." Vance nodded and barked orders. The guards moved like a well-oiled machine, flashlights sweeping beneath each SUV, each sedan, checking wheel wells and undercarriages with military precision. Within 2 minutes, they found 2 more devices, one beneath the second SUV, another attached to the sedan's rear axle, all of them blinking, all of them counting down. Herbert turned back to Kay, who was now shaking so badly she could barely stand. "The men you saw," Herbert said slowly. "Did they see you?" Kay nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes. They looked right at me. One of them started walking toward me, but another one said—" She swallowed hard. He said, "She's nobody. Let her walk." Herbert's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Boss," Vance said, approaching cautiously. "These aren't just bombs. They're transmitters. Military grade. Someone's tracking us." Herbert didn't respond. He was staring at Kay like he was seeing her for the first time, not as an intruder, not as a stranger, but as something else entirely. A witness, a variable, a problem, or maybe a solution. "Take her upstairs," Herbert said finally. "Keep her in the private office. No one touches her. No one speaks to her. And someone find out everything there is to know about Kay Owens." "Boss," Vance started. "Now," Herbert snapped. 2 guards stepped forward, flanking Kay. She looked terrified, her eyes wide, her body rigid with fear. Am I in trouble?" she whispered. Herbert looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "No," he said quietly. "You just saved all our lives." Then he turned back to the vehicles, his mind already racing, because Herbert Lopez knew exactly who had a burned forearm. He knew exactly who would dare plant bombs in his fortress, and he knew exactly what that betrayal meant. The war he didn't know he was fighting had just begun. Kay sat in the leather chair, her hands gripping the armrests like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. The private office was dimly lit, decorated with dark wood and expensive art that probably cost more than her entire apartment. 2 guards stood by the door, silent as statues, their eyes never leaving her. She couldn't stop shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them again, the 3 men crawling beneath those vehicles, their movements quick and practiced, the way the burned man had looked up at her with cold, calculating eyes. "She's nobody. Let her walk." Those words had saved her life. And now, sitting in this suffocating room, Kay wondered if they'd only delayed the inevitable. The door opened. Herbert Lopez stepped inside, and the temperature seemed to drop. He moved with the precision of a man who controlled every room he entered, his silver hair catching the dim light, his tattooed neck a stark contrast to his perfectly tailored suit. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the desk between them. "Tell me everything," Herbert said. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Kay's throat tightened. I already told you. Tell me again." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in his tone that made disobedience feel impossible. Kay swallowed hard and nodded. "I was finishing my shift," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was around 5:30 inches the morning. The restaurant was empty. My manager told me to take the trash out before I left." Herbert leaned back slightly, listening. "I went through the back door," Kay continued. "But I got confused. There are 2 doors. One goes to the dumpster area, and the other. I didn't know where it went. I opened the wrong one. And what did you see?" Kay closed her eyes, the memory flooding back with crystal clarity. "Stairs," she said. "Concrete stairs going down. I thought maybe it was storage, so I walked down a few steps. That's when I heard voices." Herbert's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. "I should have left," Kay whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have just turned around, but I heard something metal scraping. And then someone cursed, so I kept going." "You followed them." "I didn't mean to," Kay said quickly. I wanted to see what was happening. I thought maybe someone was stealing something, and I could report it, and maybe—" She stopped, realizing how stupid it sounded. "I don't know what I was thinking." "What did you see when you reached the bottom?" Kay's hands trembled in her lap. "The garage. Your garage. I saw the cars lined up, and I saw 3 men. 2 of them were under the vehicles. The 3rd was standing watch." "Describe the one standing watch." "Tall. Maybe 6 feet. Dark jacket. He had a phone in his hand, and he kept checking it, like he was waiting for something." "And the others?" Kay hesitated. This was the part that terrified her most. "One of them I couldn't see well," she said. "But the other one, the one closest to me, he had tattoos all down his arm, like from his wrist to his shoulder, and his forearm." She paused. It looked like it had been burned, badly. The skin was all scarred and uneven. Herbert's jaw tightened. For the first time since entering the room, Emotion flickered across his face, something dark and dangerous. "Did he see you?" Herbert asked quietly. Kay nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "Yes. He looked right at me, and for a second I thought he was going to kill me right there, but he didn't. No." He stood up, started walking toward me. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then the man with the phone said, "Leave her. She's nobody. Let her walk." Herbert leaned forward, his obsidian eyes locking onto hers. "What did you do?" "I ran," Kay whispered. "I ran back up the stairs as fast as I could. But when I got to the top, I realized," her voice cracked, "I realized what they were doing. They were planting something under your cars. And I thought, what if they're trying to kill someone? What if they're trying to kill you? So you came back." "I didn't know what else to do," Kay said, tears streaming down her face now. "I thought about calling the police, but I didn't know if they'd believe me. I thought about just leaving, pretending I never saw anything, but I kept thinking, what if people die because I said nothing?" She looked up at Herbert, her eyes red and pleading. "I'm not brave," she said. "I'm not some hero. I was terrified. I am terrified. But I couldn't just walk away." Silence filled the room. Herbert studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he stood. "You were supposed to be invisible," he said quietly. "A waitress. Nobody important, nobody who mattered." Kay flinched. "But you saw something you weren't supposed to see," Herbert continued. "And instead of running away, instead of pretending it never happened, you came back. You warned us." He walked to the window, staring out at the city beyond. "Do you understand what that means, Kay?" She shook her head, wiping her tears. Herbert turned back to her, and for the first time, something almost resembling respect flickered in his eyes. "It means you're not invisible anymore," he said. "It means the men who planted those devices know your face. And it means the person who sent them the burned man you saw will come looking for you." Kay's blood ran cold. "But it also means," Herbert continued, his voice hardening, "that you just became the most important witness in a war you didn't even know existed." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "So I'm going to ask you one question, Kay Owens, and I need you to answer honestly." Kay held her breath. "Are you ready to finish what you started?" Kay stared at Herbert, her mind reeling from his question. "Are you ready to finish what you started?" She didn't know how to answer. She didn't even know what finishing meant in Herbert Lopez's world. All she knew was that 12 hours ago, she'd been worrying about rent and whether her manager would give her more shifts. Now she was sitting in a mafia boss's private office, being told that men with bombs and burned arms were going to come looking for her. I don't understand," Kay stammered. "What do you want me to do?" Herbert's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained hard. "Right now? Nothing. You stay here. You stay safe. And you let me handle this." He turned toward the door, but Kay's voice stopped him. "Who is he?" Herbert paused, his hand on the doorknob. "The burned man," Kay pressed, her voice stronger now despite her fear. "You know who he is. I saw it on your face when I described him." For a long moment, Herbert didn't move. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Then, slowly, he turned back. "His name," Herbert said quietly, "is Eduardo Cordero, but everyone calls him Blaze." Kay's stomach twisted at the way Herbert said the name, like it physically hurt him to speak it aloud. "He worked for you," Kay said. "It wasn't a question." Herbert nodded. "For 15 years. He was more than an employee. He was." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He was like a son to me." Kay watched as something flickered across Herbert's face, something raw and almost human. Grief, maybe, or betrayal. "What happened?" she asked softly. Herbert walked back to the desk and sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his 61 years. "I saved his life," Herbert said, "twice. The first time was 17 years ago. Blaze was 19, stupid, and reckless. He tried to rob one of my supply trucks without knowing who owned it. My men caught him, beat him half to death, and brought him to me." Herbert's fingers drummed once on the desk. "Everyone told me to kill him, make an example. But I saw something in him, desperation, yes, but also potential. So I gave him a choice. Work for me, or die in that warehouse." "He chose to work," Kay said. "He chose to live," Herbert corrected. "And for years, he was loyal, sharp, ruthless when necessary, but controlled. He understood the rules, the structure. He became one of my most trusted enforcers. Kay leaned forward slightly. You said you saved him twice. Herbert's jaw tightened. 8 years ago, Blaze killed a federal informant. He didn't know the man was wired, didn't know the FBI had been building a case. They arrested him, had him dead to rights, 20 years minimum, probably life. But he didn't go to prison. No, Herbert said darkly. Because I paid 3 judges, 4 lawyers, and a district attorney to make the case disappear. Cost me $2 million and 6 months of political capital I'd been building for a decade. Kay's eyes widened. I saved him, Herbert continued. Because he was family. Because loyalty is supposed to mean something in this world. And when he walked out of that courthouse a free man, he looked me in the eye and swore he'd die before betraying me. The room fell silent. What changed? Kay whispered. Herbert stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. A year ago, Blaze came to me with concerns. He thought one of my operations was being too aggressive, drawing too much attention. He wanted me to scale back, lay low for a while. And you didn't. I couldn't, Herbert said. The Eastern families were moving into our territory. If we showed weakness, we'd lose everything. So I told Blaze what I've told everyone who works for me. Trust the plan. Trust the structure. Herbert's reflection in the window looked haunted. He didn't take it well. Started questioning my decisions publicly, undermining my authority with the younger soldiers. I pulled him aside, tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. He said I was choosing power over truth, that I'd become the thing I swore I'd never be. Kay's chest tightened. She could hear the pain in Herbert's voice, buried beneath layers of cold control. 2 weeks later he vanished. Herbert continued. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. My men searched for months. Nothing. It was like he'd never existed. Until today, Kay said quietly. Herbert turned from the window, and Kay saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Genuine anger, barely contained. Until today, Herbert repeated. Until the man I saved twice, the man I treated like my own blood, crawled under my vehicles and planted bombs designed to kill me and everyone I trust. Kay felt tears prick her eyes, though she didn't fully understand why. Maybe it was the weight of Herbert's betrayal. Maybe it was the realization that even in a world built on fear and violence, loyalty still mattered, still hurt when it was broken. He saw me, Kay said suddenly. Blaze saw my face. He knows what I look like. Herbert nodded grimly. Which means he knows you can identify him. And if he's working with whoever planned this. He stopped abruptly. What? Kay pressed. Working with who? Herbert's expression darkened further. The devices we found weren't just bombs, Kay. They were transmitters. Military-grade surveillance equipment. The kind of technology only one organization has access to. Kay's blood ran cold. The government. Blaze isn't just trying to kill me, Herbert said, his voice hard as steel. He's helping them. He's been feeding them information, planting surveillance, preparing a full takedown. And those bombs? They were just the opening move. He walked to the door and opened it, barking orders to the guards outside. Then he turned back to Kay one last time. You asked who Blaze is, Herbert said quietly. Now you know. He's the man who taught me that even blood can turn to poison. And he's the reason you're never leaving my sight until this is over. The door closed behind him with a final, ominous click. Kay didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Blaze's scarred forearm, the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd looked at her in that garage. She's nobody. Let her walk. Those words echoed in her mind like a death sentence with a delayed timer. The private office had become her prison. A comfortable one, sure leather furniture, expensive art, a bathroom with marble fixtures, but a prison nonetheless. The 2 guards outside never moved, never spoke, just stood there like sentinels, reminding her that she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Dawn light was just beginning to filter through the blinds when the door opened. Herbert entered, but he wasn't alone. Behind him came a thin man in his 40s, wearing thick framed glasses and carrying a laptop bag. His fingers were stained with what looked like ink or circuit board residue, and his eyes had the tired, sharp look of someone who'd been awake all night. This is Miles, Herbert said without preamble. My tech chief. Miles nodded at Kay but didn't smile. He immediately began setting up his laptop on the desk, his movements quick and efficient. We swept the entire building, Miles said, his voice clipped and professional. Every floor, every room, every vehicle. Herbert's jaw tightened. How bad is it? Miles pulled up a 3D rendering of the building on his screen. Red dots appeared throughout the structure like a disease spreading through a body. 19 active transmitters, Miles said. 12 in the garage levels, 4 in your private offices, 2 in the restaurant kitchen, and 1 in the main server room. Kay's stomach dropped. 19? All military grade, Miles continued, zooming in on one of the devices. P-Tech surveillance chips, the kind used by federal intelligence divisions for long-term monitoring operations. Each one has encrypted uplink capability, GPS tracking, and audio recording with a 300-foot radius. Herbert leaned forward, his knuckles white against the desk. How long have they been here? Miles ran his fingers across the keyboard, pulling up data streams and timestamps. Based on the battery degradation and signal logs, the oldest ones were planted approximately 8 months ago. The newest... He paused. The newest were installed 3 days ago. 3 days, Herbert repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Right before Kay started working here, Kay felt sick. They were preparing for something. Not just something, Miles said, adjusting his glasses. They were preparing for everything. These transmitters weren't just listening, they were mapping. Every conversation, every movement, every routine. They knew when you left, where you went, who you met with. They knew your entire operational structure. Herbert's hand curled into a fist. Show me the uplink destination. Miles hesitated. Boss, you're not going to like this. Show me. Miles pulled up another screen, a network map with glowing connection lines. All 19 transmitters fed into a single node, which then connected to a secure federal server farm located in Virginia. FBI? Herbert asked. Worse, Miles said quietly. Joint Task Force Alpha. That's a combined operation FBI, DEA, ATF, and NSA. This isn't a local investigation, boss. This is a federal takedown with multi-agency coordination. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of Miles's laptop. Kay watched Herbert's face, saw the way his jaw worked, the way his eyes went dark and distant. She'd been terrified of him when they first met. But now, sitting here watching him process the scope of the betrayal, she saw something else. A man who'd built an empire on control and precision, only to discover that empire had been infiltrated and compromised for months. Blaze did this, Herbert said finally. It wasn't a question. The installation patterns match his access windows, Miles confirmed. He knew every blind spot in your security, every camera angle, every guard rotation. He fed them everything. Kay spoke up, her voice small but steady. Why would the government work with him? He's a criminal, a killer. Herbert turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something like respect in his eyes at her question. Because they don't care about justice, Herbert said. They care about results. Blaze offers them something they can't get through legal channels: insider access, operational intelligence, and a way to take down an empire without a single warrant. Immunity, Kay whispered. They promised him immunity. And money? Miles added. Federal witness protection. A new life. Probably a government salary as a consultant after this is all over. Blaze gets to walk away clean while everyone else burns. Kay felt anger rising in her chest, anger she didn't know she was capable of. That's not fair. He betrayed you. He tried to kill you. Herbert looked at her for a long moment, something almost like affection crossing his face. Welcome to how the world actually works, Kay. Miles cleared his throat. Boss, there's something else. Herbert's attention snapped back. What? The transmitters weren't just recording, they were waiting for a trigger signal. All 19 devices were set to activate simultaneously at 6:47 this morning. Kay checked the clock on the wall. It was 6:23. 24 minutes from now, Herbert said. What happens at 6:47? Kay asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Miles pulled up another file. That's when your convoy was scheduled to leave. The bombs weren't just bombs, they were part of a staged assassination. The transmitters would have broadcast your location to federal agents positioned throughout the city. You would have been killed in transit, publicly, with multiple witnesses and federal agents coincidentally nearby to secure the scene. Herbert's expression went from cold to glacial. They were going to make it look like a rescue attempt gone wrong. Exactly, Miles said. Federal agents respond to a terrorist attack on a civilian convoy. Multiple casualties. But they couldn't save everyone. Tragic, heroic, and completely manufactured. Kay's hands were shaking again. And then what? Then they arrest everyone who survives, Herbert said quietly. Seize all my assets under RICO statutes. Dismantle my entire organization. And Blaze, the helpful informant who made it all possible, disappears into witness protection. It's a perfect operation, Miles said. It would have worked too, if Kay hadn't seen them, Herbert finished. All three of them looked at each other, the weight of that realization settling over the room like a shroud. Kay had saved more than lives. She'd saved an entire empire from complete annihilation. And now, with 22 minutes until the operation was supposed to begin, they had to decide what to do next. Herbert stood, his decision already made. Miles, kill every transmitter. Make it look like technical failure, not sabotage. Then scrub our servers and relocate all sensitive data. Already started, Miles said. Herbert turned to Kay. Get up. You're coming with me. Where? Kay asked, standing on shaky legs. Herbert's smile was cold and sharp. We're going to turn their perfect operation into their worst nightmare. Herbert moved through the building like a general preparing for war. Kay followed close behind, flanked by two guards whose hands never strayed far from their weapons. They descended deeper into the structure, past the garage where everything had started, down another level to a sub-basement Kay hadn't even known existed. The air grew colder, the lights dimmed, and the walls changed from painted concrete to bare steel reinforcement. Where are we going? Kay asked, her voice echoing in the narrow corridor. Somewhere they don't know about, Herbert said without turning. Somewhere Blaze never had access to. They reached a heavy steel door with a biometric scanner. Herbert pressed his palm against it, and the lock disengaged with a pneumatic hiss. Inside was a command center that looked like it belonged in a military installation, banks of monitors, encrypted communication equipment, and a conference table surrounded by high-backed chairs. 3 men were already waiting inside. They stood when Herbert entered, their faces grim and alert. Vance, you know, Herbert said, gesturing to the broad-shouldered guard who'd first checked under the SUV. This is Malcolm, my financial operations chief. And this is James, who handles external security. The men nodded at Kay but didn't speak. Their eyes assessed her with the cold efficiency of people who'd spent their lives reading threats. Herbert moved to the head of the table. Sit. Everyone sat. Herbert pulled up a display on the main screen, the same network map Miles had shown earlier. The 19 transmitters glowing like infected wounds throughout the building. Miles is shutting them down as we speak, Herbert said. But before they go dark, I need you all to understand what we're facing. He zoomed in on the federal server connection. This isn't a criminal investigation. This is a coordinated federal takedown designed to destroy everything we've built. Blaze has been feeding them intelligence for 8 months. He planted surveillance devices. He mapped our routines. He knew exactly when and where to strike. Malcolm leaned forward, his expensive suit stretching across his shoulders. The bombs in the garage, those were meant to kill us publicly. Not just kill us, Herbert corrected. To create a spectacle. A terrorist attack that would justify immediate federal intervention. They wanted casualties, witnesses, and media coverage. Then they would sweep in, arrest the survivors, and dismantle the entire organization under RICO statutes. James, the security chief, swore under his breath. We would have been destroyed within hours. You would have been, Herbert said, his voice cutting. If Kay hadn't seen them. All eyes turned to her. Kay felt her face flush hot. She wanted to disappear into the chair, but Herbert's gaze held her in place. This waitress hired 2 days ago. Nobody special according to their assessment accidentally opened the wrong door, Herbert continued. She saw what no one was supposed to see. And instead of running, instead of pretending it never happened, she came back. She warned us. Vance nodded slowly. She broke their timeline. Exactly, Herbert said. The operation was designed to trigger at 6:47 this morning. We're now, he checked his watch, 16 minutes from that moment. But instead of loading into vehicles rigged with explosives, we're here, safe, and they have no idea we know. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. So what's our play? Herbert's expression went cold and calculating, the look of a man who'd spent decades outmaneuvering enemies. We let them think it's still working, Herbert said. Kay's stomach clenched. What do you mean? Herbert turned to her, and she saw the full weight of his strategic mind working behind those obsidian eyes. Blaze's plan relied on precision timing, Herbert explained. The bombs detonate, federal agents respond, chaos ensues. But what happens when the bombs don't detonate? When the federal agents show up and find nothing? They'll know we discovered the devices, James said. They'll know someone warned us, Vance added, his eyes drifting to Kay. Kay's blood went cold. They'll come for me. Yes, Herbert said simply, which is why we're going to use that. Malcolm stood abruptly. Boss, You can't seriously be suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, Herbert interrupted. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Blaze underestimated Kay once. He thought she was nobody, irrelevant, forgettable. That mistake cost him his perfect operation. Now he knows she's a liability, a witness who can identify him, place him at the scene, and destroy his deal with the federal government. Herbert walked around the table, his hands clasped behind his back. Blaze will come for her, he continued. Not immediately, but soon. And when he does, he won't be alone. He'll bring backup, maybe federal agents, maybe his own people. Either way, he'll be desperate. Kay's voice was barely a whisper. You want to use me as bait? Herbert stopped in front of her chair, looking down at her with an expression that was almost gentle. I want to give you a choice, he said. You can walk away right now. I'll put you on a plane to anywhere in the world. New identity, new life, enough money to never work another day. You'll be safe, hidden, forgotten. Kay's heart hammered in her chest. Or you help me finish this, Herbert said. You become the witness that brings down not just Blaze, but the federal corruption that made this operation possible. You expose the conspiracy. You save more lives than just mine. The room fell silent. Kay looked around at the men watching her, these criminals, these dangerous men who'd probably done terrible things. But right now, they weren't looking at her with contempt or dismissal. They were looking at her with something else. Respect. She thought about running. God, how she wanted to run. To disappear and pretend none of this ever happened. But then she thought about those bombs. About how many people would have died if she'd stayed silent. About Blaze crawling under those vehicles with federal approval, believing he could destroy lives and walk away clean. Kay stood up, her legs shaky, but her voice steady. What do I have to do? Herbert's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, approval, maybe, or recognition. First, Herbert said, pulling a small device from his pocket. You wear this. It was a recording device, no bigger than a button. If Blaze comes for you, Herbert said, I need to hear every word he says. Kay took the device with trembling hands. And second? She asked. Herbert's smile was cold and sharp. Second, you trust me to keep you alive. Outside, somewhere in the city above them, the clock ticked toward 6:47, the moment when everything was supposed to end. But Herbert Lopez had spent 22 years building an empire on control and precision, and he wasn't about to let it fall to a traitor and a corrupt government operation. Not today. Not ever. 6:47 came and went. No explosions, no chaos, no federal cavalry sweeping in to secure the scene of a massacre that never happened. Just silence. Kay sat in the command center, the recording device clipped inside her uniform collar, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. The monitors showed multiple camera angles of the garage, the restaurant above, the street outside. Everything looked normal. Quiet, empty, too quiet. They know something's wrong, Malcolm said, staring at the screens. The transmitters went dark 15 minutes ago. The bombs didn't detonate. Their entire operation just collapsed. Herbert stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Which means they're scrambling, recalculating, and Blaze... He paused. Blaze is realizing his perfect plan fell apart because of one terrified waitress. Kay felt sick. He'll want to fix his mistake. He'll need to fix his mistake, Herbert corrected. Without you, they have no way to explain why their operation failed. But if you disappear, if you die, then you're just another loose end tied up. The federal handlers can claim technical failure, blame it on faulty equipment, and walk away clean. Vance shifted in his seat. So what's the play, boss? We lock her down here until this blows over? No, Herbert said quietly. That gives them time to regroup. Time to plan another attack. We need to force Blaze's hand. Make him act while he's desperate and angry. James leaned forward. How? Herbert's eyes drifted to Kay. We let him think she's vulnerable. Kay's stomach dropped. You want to put me out in the open? Not out in the open, Herbert said. In the garage. The same place where this started. Blaze knows that space intimately. He'll see it as an opportunity, a chance to eliminate the witness in a location he's already mapped and compromised. Malcolm shook his head. That's insane. He could have a sniper positioned. He could have backup waiting. You'd be putting her in a kill box. I'd be putting her in a controlled environment, Herbert countered. With my men positioned at every access point, with surveillance we control, and with Blaze believing he has the advantage. When he makes his move, we'll have him. And more importantly, we'll have everything he says on record. Kay's hands were trembling again. She pressed them flat against the table to stop the shaking. "What if he doesn't come?" she asked, her voice small. Herbert turned to her, and his expression softened slightly. "He'll come. His federal handlers will demand it. And Blaze?" He paused. "Blaze taught me something a long time ago. When an operation fails, the first instinct is always to eliminate the variable that caused the failure." "I'm the variable," Kay whispered. "You're the reason 8 months of planning collapsed in a single morning," Herbert said. "Blaze won't be able to resist." 20 minutes later, Kay stood in the garage. The same garage where she'd run, terrified and breathless, to stop Herbert from starting his cars. The same concrete pillars, the same fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the oil-stained floor. But now it felt different. Heavier, like the walls were closing in. Herbert's voice crackled in the nearly invisible earpiece he'd given her. "We have eyes on every entrance. Vance is positioned on the upper level. James has the east stairwell. Malcolm is monitoring the cameras. You're not alone." Kay nodded, even though Herbert couldn't see her. She was supposed to look like she was checking something, maybe inspecting the area where the bombs had been found, maybe looking for something she'd dropped. The story didn't matter. What mattered was that she looked distracted, vulnerable, bait. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain anyone nearby could hear it. Minutes passed like hours, then movement. Kay's breath caught. A shadow shifted near one of the concrete pillars on the far side of the garage. She hadn't seen anyone enter, hadn't heard footsteps, but someone was there. "Herbert," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "I see him," Herbert's voice replied, calm and steady. "Don't look directly at him. Act natural. Let him think you don't know he's there." Kay's hands shook as she pretended to examine the undercarriage of one of the SUVs. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body stayed frozen in place. The shadow moved closer, and then he stepped into the light. Blaze. Eduardo Cordero looked exactly as Kay remembered, tall, lean, with tattoos crawling up his arms and that horrific burn scar covering his right forearm. His face was hard, weathered by years of violence, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who'd spotted wounded prey. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, both armed, both moving with military precision. They fanned out, covering the exits Kay might run toward. "Kay Owens," Blaze said, his voice smooth and dangerous. The little waitress who couldn't mind her own business. Kay turned slowly, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I know who you are." Blaze smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. That'll make this easier." He took another step forward. Kay took a step back. "You cost me something very valuable this morning," Blaze continued. 8 months of work, millions of dollars in federal resources, a guaranteed path to freedom, all because you opened the wrong door at the wrong time. "I saw what you did," Kay said, her voice shaking. "I saw you planting bombs. I saw you trying to murder people." "Murder?" Blaze laughed. "Is that what Lopez told you? That I'm some kind of monster?" He shook his head. "Herbert Lopez has killed more people than you can count. He's destroyed families, corrupted officials, poisoned entire communities. And the government, the people who are supposed to protect you, they've been trying to stop him for years. I'm helping them." "By killing him? By doing what's necessary," Blaze snapped. "You don't understand the world you walked into, little girl. This isn't some fairy tale where the good guys win. Herbert isn't a good guy. Neither am I. And neither are the federal agents who promised me immunity." He moved closer. Kay backed into the SUV, trapped. "But you," Blaze continued, "you're just collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. And unfortunately for you, you became a problem I need to solve." Kay's heart raced. The recording device felt like it was burning against her skin. "So here's what's going to happen," Blaze said, pulling a pistol from his jacket. "You're going to disappear. The federal agents I'm working with, they're already surrounding this block. When they find your body, it'll look like Herbert Lopez silenced a witness. He'll be arrested, his empire will crumble, and I'll be free." "You think they'll let you walk away?" Kay asked, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "You think the FBI is going to honor their deal after this operation failed?" Blaze's smile faltered slightly. "They'll throw you away the second you're not useful," Kay continued. "You'll be just another criminal they used and discarded." "Shut up," Blaze growled. "Herbert told me about you," Kay pressed. "How he saved your life twice. How he treated you like family. And this is how you repay him?" Blaze's face twisted with rage. Herbert made his choice. He chose power over loyalty. He chose his empire over the people who built it for him. I'm just making sure he pays for it." He raised the gun. Kay closed her eyes, and then the lights went out. The garage plunged into absolute darkness. Blaze swore. His men shouted. Flashlight beams cut through the black, and in the chaos, Kay felt a hand grab her arm and pull her backward. "Move," Herbert's voice whispered in her ear. "Now." Kay stumbled through the darkness, Herbert's grip iron tight on her arm. Behind them, flashlight beams sliced through the black like searchlights, and Blaze's voice roared commands to his men. "Find her! She couldn't have gone far." Herbert pulled Kay through a service door she hadn't even known existed, hidden in the concrete wall, disguised as structural paneling. They descended a narrow maintenance stairwell, the emergency lighting casting everything in sickly red. "Are you hurt?" Herbert asked, his voice low and urgent. "No," Kay gasped, adrenaline flooding her system. "No, I'm okay. I thought he was going to." "He was," Herbert said grimly. "But he needed you to talk first. Needed you to say something he could use to justify killing you as self-defense or threatening behavior. Smart girl," keeping him talking. They reached the bottom of the stairs and emerged into the command center. Vance, Malcolm, and James were already there, and Miles was frantically typing at his laptop, pulling up audio feeds. "Did you get it?" Herbert demanded. Miles nodded, his face pale but focused. Every word. The recording device worked perfectly. "We have Blaze confessing to the bomb plot, admitting to working with federal agents, and threatening Kay's life." "Play it back," Herbert ordered. Miles hit a button, and Blaze's voice filled the room. "The federal agents I'm working with, they're already surrounding this block. When they find your body, it'll look like Herbert Lopez silenced a witness. He'll be arrested. His empire will crumble, and I'll be free." Herbert's expression went deadly cold. There it is. Federal conspiracy, attempted murder, and confirmation that government agents are actively participating in an illegal operation. Malcolm leaned forward. "Boss, if federal agents are really surrounding the building..." "They are," James interrupted, pulling up a tactical display on one of the monitors. "I've counted at least 12 unmarked vehicles positioned within a 3-block radius. Standard containment formation. They're waiting for Blaze's signal." Kay's voice was shaky. "Signal for what?" "For confirmation that you're dead," Herbert said bluntly. "Once Blaze eliminates you, he'll signal his handlers. They'll move in, discover your body, and arrest me for murder. Clean, simple, and completely fabricated." "So what do we do?" Kay asked. Herbert turned to her, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she saw something almost like admiration in his eyes. "We do exactly what Blaze didn't expect," Herbert said. "We go on offense." He moved to the head of the table, and everyone instinctively gathered around him. This was Herbert Lopez in his element, strategic, calculating, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Miles, package that recording with all the surveillance data from the transmitters," Herbert ordered. "I want timestamps, federal server connections, everything that proves government involvement. Encrypt it and prepare it for transmission." "Transmission to who?" Miles asked. "State Attorney General's office, State Police Internal Affairs, and every major news outlet in the region," Herbert said. "Simultaneously. I want this so widely distributed that the federal government can't suppress it." Malcolm's eyes widened. "You're going to expose the entire operation publicly." "I'm going to burn it down," Herbert corrected. "Blaze thought he could betray me and walk away clean. The federal agents thought they could use him to destroy me and claim jurisdiction. They were both wrong." Vance spoke up. "Boss, if we expose this, the federal government will come after us with everything they have. This isn't just embarrassing, this is career-ending for whoever authorized this operation." "Good," Herbert said coldly. "Let them come. But they'll be doing it in the open, with media coverage, with state authorities watching. No more shadow operations, no more illegal surveillance. If they want me, they'll have to do it legally." Kay watched Herbert orchestrate his counterattack, and something shifted in her understanding of him. Yes, he was a criminal. Yes, he'd probably done terrible things. But right now, he was fighting against something worse, a government that believed it could break its own laws in the name of justice. "What about Blaze?" James asked. "He's still upstairs hunting for Kay." Herbert's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Blaze is about to become very useful." He turned to Kay. "The recording device is still active, correct?" Kay touched the small button clipped inside her collar. "Yes." "Good. We're going back up there." Kay's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" "Because Blaze is operating on bad information," Herbert explained. "He thinks the federal agents surrounding this building are here to support him. He doesn't know they're about to abandon him the moment this operation becomes public. Malcolm caught on first. You want to use Kay to draw him out again. Get him to say more. I want to get him to contact his handlers. Herbert corrected. On record. With Kay as a witness. Once we have federal agents directly coordinating with Blaze on an active murder attempt, we don't just have a conspiracy, we have grounds for federal prosecution of the agents themselves. Kay's hands were shaking again. He tried to kill me 5 minutes ago. And he failed. Herbert said, stepping closer to her. Kay, I know I'm asking a lot, I know you're terrified. But right now, you're the only person who can bring down this entire corrupt operation. Not me. Not my men. You. Why me? Because you're not a criminal, Herbert said simply. You're a waitress who saw something wrong and tried to stop it. When you testify, when your recording is played in court, you're not some mobster's enforcer. You're an innocent bystander who exposed government corruption. That's powerful. That's unimpeachable. Kay looked around the room at these dangerous men who were all watching her with something like hope in their eyes. What if he shoots me before I can get him talking? Kay asked. He won't, Vance said. Because I'll have a rifle on him the entire time. The second he moves to fire, he's dead. Herbert placed his hand on Kay's shoulder, the same gesture that had felt threatening hours ago but now felt almost protective. I won't let him hurt you, Herbert said quietly. You have my word. And despite what you may think of me, when I give my word, I keep it. Kay closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about running again. About taking Herbert's offer from earlier, a plane ticket, a new identity, safety. But she also thought about all the people Blaze and his federal handlers would hurt if this operation was allowed to continue. All the families that would be destroyed. All the corruption that would go unpunished. She opened her eyes. Okay, Kay said, her voice stronger than she felt. What do I do? Herbert's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his obsidian eyes, respect, recognition, maybe even gratitude. First, Herbert said, pulling out a small device. We attach this to your collar next to the recorder. It's a tracker. I'll know exactly where you are every second. Kay nodded as he carefully clipped it in place. Second, Herbert continued, you go back into the garage. Act scared, which won't be hard. Act like you escaped and you're trying to find a way out. Blaze will find you. When he does, get him talking. Ask him questions. Make him explain his plan. And third? Kay asked. Herbert's smile was cold. Third, you trust that I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've never lost a war I was prepared to fight. He turned to his men. Vance, position yourself with Overwatch. James, secure the exits. Malcolm, coordinate with Miles on the data transmission. The second Kay gives us what we need, we release everything. Everyone moved at once, a coordinated machine that had clearly operated together for years. Herbert looked back at Kay one last time. Ready? Kay wasn't ready. She'd never be ready, but she nodded anyway. Let's finish this. The garage was still dark when Kay emerged from the hidden service door. Emergency lighting cast everything in dim, angular shadows. She could hear movement boots on concrete, the metallic click of weapons being checked, Blaze's voice barking orders somewhere in the distance. Kay's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack bone. The recording device felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The tracker Herbert had attached seemed to pulse against her skin, a constant reminder that she wasn't truly alone. But God, it felt like she was. I have you, Vance's voice whispered through the earpiece. Upper level, northwest corner. I've got clear sight lines on the entire garage floor. You're covered. Kay took a shaky breath and stepped forward, deliberately scuffing her shoes against the concrete to make noise. The effect was immediate. There! One of Blaze's men shouted. Flashlight beams swung toward her like searchlights. Kay threw up her hand against the glare, squinting, deliberately positioning herself near one of the concrete pillars exactly where Herbert had told her to stand. Where Vance can protect you, he'd said. Where the angles work in our favor. Blaze appeared from behind one of the SUVs, his scarred forearm catching the dim light, his expression twisted with fury and something else, desperation. You should have stayed hidden, Blaze said, stalking toward her. His 2 men flanked him, weapons drawn but not yet aimed. They were professionals, waiting for the order. Kay forced herself to stay still, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. I was trying to leave. I don't want any part of this. Too late for that, Blaze growled. He was 10 feet away now, close enough that Kay could see the sweat on his forehead, the tension in his jaw. You cost me everything, you understand? 8 months of work. My freedom. My future. I didn't mean to, Kay said. and the tremor in her voice wasn't entirely an act. "I was just taking out the trash. I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Blaze laughed bitterly. "You didn't know that sticking your nose where it doesn't belong would have consequences? Welcome to the real world, sweetheart." He pulled out his phone with his free hand, keeping his gun trained on Kay with the other. "What are you doing?" Kay asked. "Calling in the cavalry," Blaze said, thumb hovering over the screen. "My federal handlers are waiting for my signal. Once I confirm you're dealt with, they move in, arrest Herbert for murder, and I disappear. Witness protection, new identity, beach house in Florida, maybe." Kay's recorder was capturing every word. She needed to keep him talking, needed to get him to say more. "They're really going to let you walk away?" Kay asked. "After all this failed?" Blaze's expression darkened. "It only failed because of you, but I'm fixing that right now. By killing me. By eliminating a complication," Blaze corrected. He started dialing. "Nothing personal, kid. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Kay's mind raced. She needed him to confirm his federal contacts, needed him to say something explicit about the conspiracy. "The federal agents," Kay said quickly. "They're really surrounding this building right now?" Blaze glanced up from his phone, suspicious. "Why do you care?" "Because I don't want to die," Kay said, letting genuine fear bleed into her voice. "If they're really out there, if they're really going to arrest Herbert, maybe I can. I can testify. I can tell them what I saw. Maybe they'll protect me instead." Blaze studied her for a long moment, then laughed a harsh, ugly sound. "You think the FBI gives a damn about protecting you?" he said. "You think Agent Morrison and his task force care about some waitress who got caught in the crossfire? They'll use you up and throw you away, just like they're doing to me." "Agent Morrison," Kay repeated, memorizing the name. "He's your handler?" Blaze's eyes narrowed. "Why are you asking so many questions?" Kay's blood went cold. She'd pushed too hard, been too obvious. I'm scared," she stammered. "I just want to understand what's happening. Please, Shut up," Blaze snapped. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Morrison, it's me." "Yeah, I found her. Garage level, northwest corner, she's secured." Kay could hear a tinny voice responding on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. 10 minutes, Blaze said into the phone. "Once I confirm the target is eliminated, you move in. Herbert Lopez will be standing over a dead witness, and you'll have everything you need to." He stopped. His expression changed. "What do you mean?" "Hold position," Blaze said, his voice rising. "We agreed, Morrison. We had a deal." The tinny voice on the other end grew louder, more urgent. Blaze's face went white. "What do you mean it's been compromised?" he shouted into the phone. "What are you no wait, Morrison." The line went dead. Blaze stared at his phone in disbelief, then slowly turned to Kay. And in that moment, Kay saw the exact second he realized he'd been played. "What did you do?" Blaze whispered. "Not me," Kay said, her voice stronger now. "Herbert." The lights in the garage suddenly blazed back to life, blindingly bright after so long in darkness. And standing at every entrance, every stairwell, every exit, were not Blaze's men or federal agents. They were state police officers in full tactical gear. "Eduardo Cordero," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Drop your weapon and get on the ground. Now." Blaze spun, his gun swinging wildly between Kay and the approaching officers. His 2 men had already dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. "This isn't possible," Blaze said, more to himself than anyone else. "Morrison said they promised." "Agent Morrison is currently being detained by Federal Internal Affairs." Herbert Lopez's voice cut through the chaos. He emerged from behind the state police line, flanked by Vance and Malcolm, along with 11 other federal agents who participated in your illegal operation. Blaze's gun hand trembled. "You can't, Herbert, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Herbert said coldly, stepping closer. "You betrayed me. You worked with corrupt federal agents to destroy everything I built. You planted bombs intended to kill not just me, but everyone in my organization. And you tried to murder an innocent woman whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time." "She was a witness," Blaze shouted desperately. "She would have ruined everything." "She did ruin everything," Herbert said with grim satisfaction. "Your everything. Because Kay Owens recorded every word you said, about the bombs, about your federal handlers, about your plan to frame me for her murder. And 30 seconds ago, That recording, along with 8 months of surveillance data proving federal conspiracy, was simultaneously transmitted to the state attorney general, state police internal affairs, and 17 major news outlets. The color drained from Blaze's face. "Your federal handlers can't protect you anymore," Herbert continued, his voice like ice. "They're too busy trying to protect themselves. Agent Morrison and his task force are about to become the biggest law enforcement scandal in a decade. And you, Eduardo, the man I saved twice, the man I treated like family, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison." Blaze's gun dropped slightly. Kay could see tears forming in his eyes, tears of rage, of betrayal, of complete and utter defeat. "I did this for justice," Blaze said weakly. "You're a criminal, Herbert. You've hurt people, destroyed lives. The law couldn't touch you, so you became worse than me," Herbert finished. "At least I never pretended to be righteous. At least I never hid behind a badge while committing murder." The state police moved in, weapons trained on Blaze from every angle. "Last warning," the officer with the loudspeaker called. "Drop your weapon." Blaze looked at Kay one final time. She saw something break behind his eyes, the last remnants of whatever justification he'd built to excuse his betrayal. His gun clattered to the concrete. On the ground. "Hands behind your head." Blaze dropped to his knees, then prostrated himself on the oil-stained garage floor. Officers swarmed him, zip-tying his wrists, reading him his rights in monotone voices that had spoken those same words 1,000 times before. Kay's legs gave out. She collapsed against the concrete pillar, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold floor, her entire body shaking with adrenaline crash. Herbert crossed the garage and crouched beside her. "It's over," he said quietly. "You did it, Kay. You brought down an entire corrupt operation." Kay looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of disbelief that she'd actually survived. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know," Herbert said. And for the first time his expression was genuinely gentle. "But you didn't let that fear stop you. That takes courage most people will never have." As state police officers led Blaze away in handcuffs, the man who'd tried to destroy Herbert Lopez now destroyed himself, Kay realized something profound. She'd walked into this garage 12 hours ago as nobody special. Just a waitress taking out trash, trying to make rent, invisible to everyone who mattered. But she was leaving it as the woman who'd exposed federal corruption, saved countless lives, and proved that sometimes the most unlikely person can change everything. Herbert helped her to her feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe. You've earned it." The state police station was chaos. Kay sat in a conference room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of terrible coffee going cold in her hands. Through the window, she could see officers moving with urgent purpose, phones ringing constantly, and television crews setting up outside despite the early morning hour. The story had broken. Federal agents implicated in illegal surveillance and assassination plot. Mafia boss exposes government corruption. Waitress hero saves lives. Uncovers conspiracy. The headlines scrolled across the muted television in the corner, each one more sensational than the last. Kay couldn't quite process that they were talking about her. Herbert sat across the table, looking tired but satisfied. Vance stood by the door like a sentinel. Malcolm and James had been separated for individual interviews, but Herbert had insisted Kay stay with him. For her protection, he'd told the detective in charge. And surprisingly, they'd agreed. A woman in a sharp suit entered the room, late 40s, steel gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. She carried a tablet and a recording device. "Miss Owens, I'm Assistant Attorney General Patricia Reeves," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for your patience." Kay shook her hand weakly. "Am I in trouble?" "Trouble?" Reeves actually smiled. "Miss Owens, you're the reason we're about to prosecute the biggest case of federal corruption this state has seen in 20 years. You're not in trouble. You're a star witness." She sat down and activated her recording device. "I need you to walk me through everything that happened, from the moment you first saw Eduardo Cordero and his associates." Kay told her story. All of it. The wrong door, the men in the garage, the burned forearm, her decision to warn Herbert despite her terror, the recording device Herbert had given her, Blaze's confession, the federal agents, Agent Morrison, everything. Reeves listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When Kay finished, Reeves sat back and studied her for a long moment. "You realize," Reeves said slowly, "that what you did was extraordinarily dangerous and extraordinarily brave." Kay's voice was small. "I just didn't want people to die." "And they didn't," Reeves said firmly. Because of you. She glanced at Herbert. Both of you, actually. Mr. Lopez, I'll be honest, your methods were unorthodox, but the evidence you've provided is incontrovertible. The recordings, the surveillance data, the federal server connections, it's airtight. So what happens now? Herbert asked. Now? Reeves leaned forward. Now we arrest every federal agent involved in this operation. Agent Morrison and his entire task force are already in custody. We've frozen their communications, seized their files, and begun the process of criminal prosecution. And Blaze? Kay asked quietly. Reeves's expression hardened. Eduardo Cordero is facing federal conspiracy charges, attempted murder, illegal surveillance, and about a dozen other felonies. His deal with the FBI is void. You can't receive immunity for crimes you commit while supposedly working as an informant. He's looking at life without parole. Kay felt something twist in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but something complicated. Blaze had tried to kill her, yes. But there was also something tragic about watching a man destroy himself so completely. He believed he was doing the right thing, Kay said softly. He told me Herbert was a criminal, that he was helping the government stop him. And perhaps Herbert Lopez is a criminal, Reeves said, glancing at Herbert without apology. But that doesn't give federal agents the right to break the law themselves. Plant bombs, conduct illegal surveillance, coordinate assassination attempts, that's not justice. That's corruption, masquerading as righteousness. Herbert's expression remained carefully neutral. Reeves stood. Miss Owens, you'll need to give formal testimony before a grand jury. That will happen within the next few weeks. Until then, I'm recommending you be placed under protective custody. She stays with me, Herbert interrupted. Reeves raised an eyebrow. Mr. Lopez, I appreciate your assistance, but Miss Owens needs legitimate protection from who? Herbert cut her off. The federal agents who tried to kill her are in custody. Blaze and his men are arrested. Who exactly poses a threat to her now? There could be others, Reeves argued. People loyal to Cordero, or federal agents not yet identified. Let me be very clear, Herbert said, his voice going cold. Kay Owens risked her life to save mine. She exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed everything I've built. She trusted me when she had every reason not to. And now you're asking me to hand her over to the same government system that just tried to murder both of us? Mr. Lopez. She stays with me, Herbert repeated. Unless she tells me otherwise. Both of them turned to look at Kay. Kay stared at her cold coffee, her mind spinning. 2 days ago, she'd been terrified of Herbert Lopez. Now she was being asked to choose between his protection and the government's. I want to stay with Herbert, Kay said quietly. Reeves looked like she wanted to argue, but she clearly recognized a losing battle when she saw one. Fine, but you'll be contacted soon about grand jury testimony. Don't leave the state. She gathered her things and left, leaving Kay and Herbert alone except for Vance by the door. Why? Kay asked Herbert. Why do you care what happens to me? Herbert was quiet for a long moment. 22 years ago, he finally said, I built my empire on a simple principle. Loyalty is everything. Betray that loyalty, and there are consequences. Honor that loyalty, and you're protected. Always. He met her eyes. Blaze forgot that principle, Herbert continued. He thought betrayal was justified if the cause was righteous enough. But you, a terrified waitress who owed me nothing, you honored a loyalty you didn't even know you had. You saw people in danger and you warned them, despite the cost to yourself. I just did what anyone would do, Kay whispered. No, Herbert said firmly. You did what almost no one would do, and that makes you more trustworthy than half the people who've worked for me for years. Kay felt tears prick her eyes again. She was so tired, so overwhelmed, so completely out of her depth. What happens now? She asked. To me? I mean, after the testimony, after all of this is over. Herbert leaned back in his chair, considering. That depends, he said. What do you want to happen? Kay blinked. She hadn't expected that question. Hadn't expected to have a choice. I don't know, she admitted. Go back to being a waitress, I guess? Try to forget any of this ever happened? You could, Herbert said. Or you could work for me, Herbert said simply. Not as a waitress. As someone who sees things others miss. Someone brave enough to speak up when something's wrong. Someone I can trust. Kay stared at him in disbelief. You're offering me a job? In your organization? I'm offering you a future, Herbert corrected. One where you're not invisible anymore. Where you matter. Where your courage is valued instead of ignored. Kay's mind reeled. Was she really considering this? Working for a mafia boss? Becoming part of the world that had nearly killed her? But then she thought about her tiny apartment, her minimum wage job, the way her manager had looked right through her like she didn't exist. She thought about how it felt to be nobody, to be invisible, to spend her whole life knowing she'd never matter to anyone. And then she thought about the last 12 hours, the terror. Yes, but also the way Herbert had looked at her with respect, the way Vance had called her brave, the way she'd stopped a conspiracy and saved lives, the way she'd mattered. I need time, Kay said finally. To think, to process all of this. Herbert nodded. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. He stood and gestured toward the door. Come on, let's get you somewhere you can rest. You've earned it. As Kay followed Herbert Lopez out of the state police station, past the news crews and flashing cameras, past the officers who nodded respectfully at the girl who'd exposed federal corruption, she realized something fundamental had changed. She'd walked into that garage as Kay Owens, nobody Waitress. She was walking out as Kay Owens, the woman who changed everything. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible anymore. 3 weeks later, Kay stood in front of the mirror in Herbert's penthouse guest suite, adjusting the collar of her new blouse. New clothes, new apartment, well, guest suite, but it was 3 times the size of her old place. New life. Everything had changed. The grand jury testimony had been grueling 6 hours of questions, cross-examinations, showing the recordings, identifying voices, reliving every terrifying moment. But she'd gotten through it. The indictments had come down the next day. Agent Morrison and 12 federal agents charged with conspiracy, illegal surveillance, attempted murder, and corruption. Blaze Cordero was facing 47 separate felony counts. The news coverage had been relentless. Kay's face was everywhere. Talk shows wanted interviews. Book publishers were calling with offers. Random people on the street recognized her and called her a hero. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. There was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Kay called. Herbert entered, impeccably dressed as always, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one made exactly how she liked it, she noticed. He'd been paying attention. Ready? He asked. Kay nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Today was the day. The day she had to make her decision. They walked through the penthouse, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, so far removed from Kay's old life it felt like another planet, and out onto the private terrace. The city stretched out below them, morning sunlight catching on glass and steel. Herbert leaned against the railing, sipping his coffee, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. I've been thinking, Kay said finally, about your offer. And, Kay took a deep breath. I don't want to be a criminal. I don't want to hurt people or break laws or become someone my family wouldn't recognize. Herbert nodded slowly. That's fair. But, Kay continued, I also don't want to go back to being invisible. To being someone nobody notices, nobody values, nobody listens to. She turned to face him fully. You told me I see things others miss. That I'm brave enough to speak up when something's wrong. I want to keep being that person. But on my terms. Herbert's expression was unreadable. What terms? I want to work for you, Kay said, her voice growing stronger. But not in anything illegal. I want to help with your legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the properties, the operations that exist in the daylight. And if I ever see something wrong, something corrupt, something that puts innocent people in danger, I want your word that I can speak up without consequences. Herbert studied her for a long moment, his obsidian eyes calculating, measuring. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled a real smile, not the cold, dangerous one she'd seen in the garage. You're negotiating with me, he said, sounding almost amused. Most people are too terrified to make demands. I'm terrified, Kay admitted, but I'm tired of letting fear control my life. Herbert set down his coffee and extended his hand. Deal. You work for me in legitimate operations only. You report directly to me. You speak up when you see problems. And in return, I pay you 3 times what you were making as a waitress, provide security when needed, and guarantee that your voice will always be heard. Kay stared at his hand. This was it, the moment that would define everything that came after. She shook his hand firmly. Deal. Herbert's grip was strong but not crushing. Welcome to the organization, Kay Owens. The restaurant was busy during lunch rush. Kay moved through the dining room with practiced ease, checking in with tables, ensuring everything ran smoothly. But she wasn't a waitress anymore, she was the operations manager. Herbert's eyes and ears in his most visible, legitimate business. The staff had been wary of her at first. Everyone knew who she was, what she'd done. Some saw her as Herbert's pet project, others as a government spy who'd turn on them. But Kay had worked hard to earn their respect, learning every aspect of the business, listening to their concerns, fixing problems before they escalated, and slowly, they'd started to trust her. "Kay, we have a situation in the kitchen," her assistant manager said, approaching with a worried expression. Kay followed him back, where she found two line cooks arguing heatedly while the head chef tried to separate them. "What's going on?" Kay asked calmly. "He's been skimming," one cook shouted, pointing at the other. "Taking steaks home, pocketing cash from the register. I've seen him." "That's a lie," the other cook protested. "He's just trying to get me fired because—" "Enough," Kay said firmly. Both men fell silent. "We're going to handle this professionally. You," she pointed to the accused cook. "My office, now. You," she pointed to the accuser. "Write down exactly what you saw, with dates and times. Chef, can you cover the line?" The head chef nodded, already moving to fill the gap. In her small office, formerly a storage closet, but it was hers, Kay sat across from the nervous cook. "Tell me the truth," she said quietly. "No yelling, no accusations. Just truth." The cook's shoulders slumped. "My kid got sick. The medical bills, I couldn't afford them. I thought if I just took a little, just enough to cover the costs, no one would notice." Kay's chest tightened. She understood desperation, understood making bad choices because you saw no other option. "How much?" she asked. "Maybe 300 over the past month," the cook whispered. "I was going to pay it back, I swear." Kay nodded slowly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to work out a payment plan to return what you took. It comes out of your paycheck over the next 3 months. In exchange, you keep your job and we don't press charges." The cook's eyes widened with hope. "Really? Really? But if you ever steal again, you're done. No second chances. Understood?" "Understood. Thank you. God, thank you." After he left, Kay sat back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. This was what she'd wanted, the ability to solve problems, to help people, to make things right without violence or threats. She picked up her phone and called Herbert. "How's your first week as operations manager?" he asked. "Busy," Kay said, "but good. I just dealt with an employee theft situation." "How did you handle it?" Kay explained the payment plan, the second chance, the clear boundary. Herbert was quiet for a moment. "Most of my people would have fired him immediately. Probably would have broken his fingers as a message to the rest of the staff." "I'm not most of your people," Kay said. "No," Herbert agreed. "You're not. That's why I hired you." That evening, Kay returned to the penthouse to find Vance waiting for her. "Boss wants to see you," he said. "Private office." Kay followed him down, wondering what had happened now. But when she entered Herbert's office, he was alone, sitting behind his massive desk with a glass of whiskey. "Sit," he said. Kay sat, suddenly nervous. Herbert slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Inside were legal documents, contracts, property deeds, bank statements. "What is this?" Kay asked. "Your bonus," Herbert said simply. "The state of California is offering a reward for information leading to the arrest and prosecution of corrupt federal agents. $250,000. It's yours." Kay stared at the numbers, unable to process them. $250,000. "I can't," she started. "You earned it," Herbert interrupted. "You exposed the corruption. You testified. The money is legally yours. I'm just facilitating the transfer." Kay's hands trembled as she held the documents. This money could change her life, pay off her mother's medical debt, help her younger brother with college, give her a foundation to build on. "There's something else," Herbert said. He pulled out a smaller envelope and handed it to her. Inside was a handwritten letter. Kay recognized the cramped, desperate handwriting immediately. It was from Blaze. "Kay, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know something. When I saw you in that garage that first morning, I told my men you were nobody. I believed it. Just another minimum wage worker. Invisible, irrelevant, the kind of person people like me look right through. I was wrong. You were braver than any soldier I ever commanded, more loyal than anyone in Herbert's organization, and more honest than every federal agent I worked with combined. You saw something wrong and you fixed it, despite the cost to yourself. I spent 15 years with Herbert Lopez. And I betrayed him because I convinced myself I was righteous. But you working for 2 days, owing him nothing, you saved his life, because it was the right thing to do. I destroyed myself because I forgot what loyalty means. You built yourself up by remembering. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison thinking about that. Whatever happens next. Kay Owens. Don't let this world make you invisible again. Don't let anyone tell you you're nobody. You changed everything. Eduardo. Kay folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. He's right, you know, Herbert said quietly. You did change everything. Not just for me, not just for this organization. You changed what's possible. You proved that one person, in the right moment, with the right courage, can bring down empires. Kay wiped her eyes. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't, Herbert said. That's what makes you extraordinary. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city he'd controlled for 22 years. I've spent my entire adult life building this empire on fear and power, Herbert said. And in one morning, a terrified waitress taught me something I'd forgotten. Sometimes courage matters more than either. He turned back to Kay. You're going to do great things, Kay Owens. Whether it's here with me or somewhere else, you're going to change lives. Because that's who you are. Kay stood, clutching Blaze's letter and the bonus documents. Thank you, she said quietly. For giving me a chance. For seeing me when everyone else looked right through me. Herbert's expression softened. Thank you for saving my life. And for reminding me why loyalty matters. 6 months later, Kay stood outside the restaurant, her restaurant now, partially owned, with Herbert as a silent partner, and watched the evening crowd file in. The federal trials were over. Agent Morrison and his task force were serving lengthy prison sentences. Blaze Cordero had been sentenced to life without parole. The scandal had triggered a massive overhaul of federal law enforcement oversight. And Kay Owens, the waitress who'd changed everything, had become something she'd never imagined possible. Someone who mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Herbert. Proud of you? Dinner tomorrow? My treat. Kay smiled and texted back. Only if you're buying. I know you can afford it. She slipped her phone back in her pocket and walked into her restaurant, greeting customers by name, checking on her staff, ensuring everything ran perfectly. She wasn't invisible anymore. She would never be invisible again. And somewhere, in a maximum security federal prison, Eduardo Blaze Cordero sat in his cell and thought about the waitress who'd beaten him by simply doing the right thing. The girl who'd changed the war by refusing to walk away. The girl who'd proven that sometimes the most unlikely person can save the world. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.